One of the first things you're supposed to do is be skeptical of government, right? That's your job. You're supposed to be a counter. They were essentially taking dictation, many in the press, from the same government officials who had engaged in wrongdoing, some of whom had been fired. The Fourth Estate is meant to keep government on its toes, expose ill doings, and work on behalf of the people by telling the truth.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rebecca Weber, and this is your AMAC podcast, Better for America. And to all of our AMACers listening, thank you for tuning in. Today we have with us Kimberly Strassel. She is an American conservative columnist, a member of the editorial board for the Wall Street Journal, and in 2014 she won the Bradley Prize. She was a recipient of the Bradley Prize. She's a regular contributor to Sunday political shows, including CBS's Face the Nation, Fox News Sunday, and NBC's Meet the Press. Kimberly Strassel, it's such a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you for joining us.
Well, I am so happy to be here, Rebecca, and I have a lot of respect for AMAC and all it does, so it's an honor.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you so much. You really are one of the clearest, incisive political analysts in the country. And so here we are at what seems another major crossroads for our nation. We see China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea threatening us from abroad, and a seemingly unaccountable left-leaning chief executive. So even hearkening back to Abe Lincoln and even the Bible, we seem to be a real house divided, literally. Both parties are divided, and a house divided usually falls. So my question for you is, do you think that we can weather the next 2 years with a divided country, and can conservatives who really respect freedom, faith, and institutions unify behind a candidate who might deliver those?
Yeah, I think that we can, especially if conservatives can figure out how to do that unification, as you said. You know, one of the things I keep reminding people is that America's having an up-close and personal experience with liberalism, with an administration that is pushing forward ideas that are more progressive and aggressive than anything that we have probably seen since when Jimmy Carter was in office, if not before. And I like to remind people what came after Jimmy Carter. It turns out that people were really sick of that experiment, and there was a great communicator who did unite the conservative movement named Ronald Reagan, and not only was elected to office, but fundamentally changed the structure of politics in the country for a generation or more, the Reagan Revolution. This is a moment for conservatives because they need to be thinking about how they get a leader like that next time around, one who can not just unite the whole party, but invite other people in. And this is the moment to be thinking that, to have that discussion. And there's a lot of people out there that could potentially fit the bill. But that's what's really at stake here. It's not just the next 2 years, but do conservatives capitalize on the great discontent that is washing across the country and use it to build a new movement?
Thank you so much, Kim. You really are famous for being a thoughtful and very detailed columnist. And if Republicans now control the House committees, including Oversight, and Oversight does all of the investigations, in your opinion, what are the top issues that you think that they ought to investigate? In other words, where should they start maybe turning over some rocks and getting at the truth? And what are the must-do, must-examine issues in the months ahead?
So I think some of them are the ones that Americans most deserve the answers on. And that would include taking a deep dive in the FBI, looking a little bit more at what happened starting all the way back with the Russia collusion hoax that happened in the country. But also we've had whistleblowers coming forward talking to Congress about continued political bias happening, at least at the very top of the agency. I think Americans deserve answers on Afghanistan and that horrible withdrawal that so weakened the country. I think they deserve answers in terms of the CDC and various other public health organizations that very much got it wrong in a lot of ways on COVID, mostly so that we know how to make sure that we get it right if there's another pandemic. And that would be my one little caveat here, is that I know that there is a pent-up demand for investigations. And Democrats spent the last 4 years doing that. And there's almost a kind of little bit of a retribution feeling going on here, like let's do this ourselves. I would hope that the new Congress spends about 90% of its time on governance, because the American people really, really need that. When I've been out and talking, they care about that just as much, if not more, than they do what I would like to instead call oversight. And I would hope that the oversight, which is meant to be done to inform legislative purpose, not to put people in the dock, but it's instead to find out where agencies are going wrong and fix them. I would hope that it would stick to agencies and not go after people, not go after persons, not make this personal. Let's be grown-ups. Let's get back to good governance. Let's conduct good oversight and get some answers.
Yeah, thank you so much. Those are good guiding insights. I agree there. And you were recently recognized for your thoughtful and honest and really hard-hitting approach to journalism. You received the Woman of Valor Award at the International Women's Forum Gala. So congratulations. And you are truly a path-breaking and uncompromising explorer for truth. And when you find it, you explain it with clarity and respect for your readers' intelligence. So we appreciate that. But now, if you widen the lens, really, and you look at the whole field of journalism today, much of what you see is just political activism. There's really a sense of a lost compass, really. It's not the standards that we used to expect of those who define American media. Many in the media seem not to have investigative integrity. They're content to be shallow cheerleaders, really, for the Democratic Party, in my view, or apologist for less leftism. So just a couple of quick questions around journalism. How did we slide so far so fast? And can we fix this? And then finally, if the mainstream media caters to leftist policies in one party, if they give up their role as honest critics, are we in bad trouble?
Yeah. By the way, Rebecca, you're so kind. I need you to come talk to my kids, and make them have a better attitude about me. Look, I've been in journalism now for, going on 30 years. And there was always bias out there. And, we talked about this a lot at the conservatives. But it really changed, I think, about 6 years ago as we went into the 2016 election, where a lot of journalists told themselves that it was okay to pick a side because they were saving America. And somehow use that to justify outright political and partisan bias in terms of their reporting. It's been a very dangerous turn in my mind, because it's allowed them to use the excuse that they can do that and then break all the rules, again, on the grounds that somehow they are doing something noble. Okay, and I think deep down, people understand that's not the truth. The reason they're doing it is they don't particularly like some of the politics involved or the people involved. But they've suggested, look, the Washington Post, democracy dies in darkness. That kind of gives you everything you need to know about the mentality that besieged so many journalists about 6 years ago. And, one of the problems with this is that they break the rules in every way, fashion, and form. As a journalist, one of the first things you're supposed to do is be skeptical of government, right? That's your job. You're supposed to be a counter puncher to government spin, government officials. But look at what happened during the Russia collusion narrative. They were essentially taking dictation, many in the press, from the same government officials who had engaged in wrongdoing, some of whom had been fired, but just telling their side, their story, not actually asking any questions. That's very problematic, because the Fourth Estate is meant to keep government on its toes, expose ill doings, and work on behalf of the people by telling the truth. Here's the good news, is that for every outlet that I think has gone down that road, there have been others that have popped up. They might not have as big a megaphone, but they are committed to continuing to tell the truth, to respecting their readers, to understanding that their job isn't just to give a narrative. And what I always argue to people, if you don't like that kind of partisan journalism, there's a very easy answer to it. It's the same thing that we do as consumers every day. Turn it off, don't buy it, don't listen to it, and send the message that that kind of journalism isn't acceptable.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one thing Donald Trump did do during his time in office was to point out the fact that a lot of what we read and see in mainstream media is not the real news or very, very much slanted. And I think prior to 2016, I don't know if average people recognized what was happening because it did happen over time. So whether some people think that was a good thing or a bad thing, ultimately, I think it certainly puts a spotlight on the fact that, we've got to know who we're reading, what we're watching, and do our own homework to make sure that we're getting to the truth. And it's a reason why AMAC really expanded and invested in our own, news and opinion analysis division in order to be another place for our membership to come to get the information that they're interested
Right.
in. So we so appreciate the good work that you do. Our nation desperately needs more people like you. I do want to ask you a final question, maybe a personal question if I could, because I have such great respect for my father. He raised a large family. He was a man of gratitude. He had great faith. He was eager to serve in the military. He was unafraid of hard work and the definition of really a true patriot. And as you know, fearing for the future, knowing seniors needed a place to turn for truth and honesty and advocacy, it was my father who founded AMAC 15 years
Wow.
ago. Yeah, so it's my absolute honor to work and carry on his legacy. We lost my dad 2 years ago. But I know that your father was very influential in your life. Would you be able to share a few of the lessons that your father taught you, lessons that linger or guide you or perhaps fortified you in some way?
Sure. No, absolutely. And that's very heartwarming, your story about your dad. I have a similar
Yeah.
one. He raised four daughters. They kept trying for a son. They finally gave up. And we lost my father 5 or 6 years ago as well, too,
Oh,
which
I'm
was a
sorry.
real tragedy in my family. But in addition to some of those great words you used about your dad, hardworking patriot, that was obviously my dad. One of the things that I have most loved about my dad, and I just think it's so important now when we have this new generation coming on, I watch my own children, was what he taught me about self-reliance. Just this notion, especially as a woman, because he had four daughters, this notion that you can't expect anybody else to necessarily be there or do something for you. And that you kind of have an obligation to understand how to look after yourself on both small things and big things. So, yeah, that includes paying your bills, right? Being responsible in your community. But, it comes down to also, do you know how to change your own tire? Sometimes that's a good thing to do. Do you know how a toilet works? And if it stops working, can you go and fix it? My dad, he had four daughters and he had a rule. He was an auto mechanic. And his rule was that none of us were allowed to drive a car until we had taken one apart and put it back together. So, while a lot of my friends in high school were hanging at the mall, I was learning how to play with a carburetor because he did try to make it fun. We all restored old cars together with him. And I still have a 1965 Buick Riviera that I restored with my dad back when I was in high school. So I try to do this with my own kids. I've got one who's in high school right now, and he's a senior, so he's going to be headed off to college. And this year, in addition to keeping up our grades, we're having lots of discussions about how do you do your laundry, right? How do you make doctor's appointments? How do you manage these things? Because there's just a lot of younger kids these days that seem to be clueless about a lot of that. And then also grumpy when people don't show up to take care of them in the end, whether it be their parents or the government. And I just think all could use a little bit more self-reliance.
That is fabulous. I love it. Very important, especially in these days. So what a great reminder. Thank you for sharing that story. And one final question I've got to ask you. We've got a lot of young, vibrant writers right here at AMAC that are eager to learn, that are eager to, do some behind the scenes work, and others that we know that are entering into journalism. What advice, if you could offer one or two, just a handful of quick pieces of advice to young folks that are entering into this field? You've got so much great experience behind you, and you're proven. What might you tell these young folks?
So my top piece of advice is actually learn how to be a journalist, okay? We have so many fields these days, and we also have so many outlets that are pure expressions of opinion. And by the way, I respect that. I'm an opinion writer. I work on the editorial page of the Wall Street Journal, and our job is to provide facts, but with a way that people can think about it as well, too, a worldview. Our motto is free markets, free people, and so we weigh in on that. But the other thing I've always loved about the editorial page, and I think it goes back to what you were sort of talking about in journalism, is that we take pride that we are a reported editorial page. So we don't just sit down and, whatever's bothering us that day, do a screed on that. We're trying to impart information to the people who are reading. And again, first and foremost, give them facts, but then also maybe give them, if they're conservative or other people who are persuadable, a way to look at those facts and think about them and process them. You can't do that, and you can't be a reported opinion writer unless you know how to pick up the phone, have sources, and engage in real journalism. And I'm very grateful that I actually spent the first 5 or so years of my time at the Wall Street Journal on the news side of the Wall Street Journal, being a straight up reporter, writing first about technology and for a while about real estate. Those are really valuable skills. They'll make you a stronger, if your ultimate goal is to be an opinion writer, knowing how to be a journalist first and get the facts that you need to provide and make your argument to people. That's the whole point. Opinions should not be about releasing anger. They should be about trying to persuade people. And you'd only do that with facts and quality information.
I love this. Excellent. Thank you for sharing that so much. Just such a pleasure to have you here with us. I know you've got a great podcast that airs daily. How can our listeners get to that and listen?
Yeah, it's called the Potomac Watch podcast, and I am lucky enough to do it. It's 5 days a week, and it's usually me and a number of my colleagues at the editorial board, and you can get it anywhere where you subscribe to your podcast. So PW Podcast, or Potomac Watch Podcast.
Potomac Watch Podcast. Kimberly Strassel, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure having you here with us today, because your writing brings hope to so many people who have really very doubtful that journalism can still be opinionated, and no longer pushed through partisans. So we here at AMAC admire your tenacity and your skills, and we're grateful for all that you are doing. Thank you so much, Kimberly Strassel.
Thank you, Rebecca, and thanks for all you guys are doing too.
Oh, thank you. And to all of you AMACers out there, thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, go ahead and listen to more just like it. Head to our YouTube channel or visit us at bfapodcast.us, and you can listen to us on iTunes, Spotify, or by downloading our free AMAC News app. And don't forget to follow us wherever you are on social media. Until next time, I'm Rebecca Weber. This is your podcast, Better for America. Thank you for being here. God bless you. Have a wonderful evening.